everybody. Welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here, and we are just about 9 days away from the Minnesota Vikings taking the field for an actual training camp practice. Whoa. That leaves us a little bit of time to have some final conversations previewing training camp, which I'm excited about. And nobody loves more than me to dive into the back end of the roster, to the undrafted free agents, to the Mr. Mankato's, to the who is the seventh round draft pick who could suddenly emerge. I mean, and look, through the years, there's been some really fun examples of this. Some have worked out better than others, but I was thinking back today. I was on a flight and it got delayed. So I had some time to sit in a chair and think about the Vikings in training camp. And I was thinking of some of the names that popped up through the years that were really fun stories of like, hey, I never saw it coming with Najee Thompson. Give you a little Najee Thompson story before I get into the main point of tonight's show. There was an intern for a local TV station that came up to me and a couple other writers and just asked for some advice. Hey, how should I go about covering this training camp practice? I've never been to one before. What should I do? And I said, you know what you should do? You should go up to Najee Thompson and you should talk to him because everybody's going to surround Justin Jefferson at the podium and everyone's going to surround Jonathan Grenard when he comes off the field, or Blake Cashman or whoever. I forget what year this was. No, it must not have been those guys, but you know what I mean? The stars. This must have been 2 years ago. So whoever it was, the star players at the time, everybody's going to surround them and talk to them. So you'll probably not get any opportunity. So what you should do is you should stop the guy who's probably 90th on the roster and you should find out his story because I'm sure he'll take the time to talk with you. And the other writers who will remain nameless laughed at me and they said, Najee Thompson, why would you tell the kid to go talk to him? He's not making the team. I'm like, I don't know. He might. You never know. And I don't recall whether the kid actually went up to Najee Thompson and took my advice or not. But then a few weeks later, Najee Thompson started to become a guy for the Minnesota Vikings. And when they had the joint practices against the Titans, he was winning the one-on-ones when it came to the special teams, which are really energetic in those joint practices. There's a lot of guys trying to make that effort to show they should be on special teams. Najee Thompson stood out there. He ultimately ends up making the team, making an impact, and so forth. So you never really know. Because if I were to have ranked everybody in 2023 camp for their chances to make the team, he might have been like 89th. And he ended up making it. The same thing for Dan Chisena a couple years ago. Never would have seen that coming. Ivan Pace, like I could have predicted that he might make the team as a backup linebacker, but I never would have thought he would have actually made the team. So that is always a really fun part of previewing training camp, thinking about it, getting ready for it. Who's going to be that guy this year who takes us by storm in training camp? But one thing that we can have a tendency to do as we're talking so much about the new guys and the undrafted free agents and where they're going to fit in and which battle for tight end 3 or wide receiver 5 or defensive tackle 5 or outside linebacker 6 is going to make it. Again, great conversations. I enjoy them, but we forget to talk about the most important players sometimes on the team because we just kind of go, well, they're just settled. We just know they're going to be great. And so we don't really have to talk about them. But I think that we do have to talk about them. And I'm excited to do so. I want to know from you guys which star player at training camp you think is the most interesting. And I'll start the conversation with Justin Jefferson. Now, I do want to say that Justin Jefferson at training camp, if you get a chance to go and get a chance to see him at camp, it is a sight to behold. And especially if you get a chance to see the joint practices, the night practice where the energy is ramped up a little bit. Because I think of all the players that I've seen at training camp, if I were to do a ranking of all the most impressive training camp players, off the top of my head, Justin Jefferson's probably number 1. I think Everson Griffin might be number 2. Because Everson just never slowed down, never stopped, never took a day off. and he drove everybody crazy. I think on the offensive line, they wanted nothing to do with him by the end of training camp because he was so violent in those camp practices. Stephon Diggs was another one that went hard all the time, got into some tussles with Xavier Rhodes, and got a couple of times a little bit heated in the same way that he does during actual games in camp. But he was smoking fools. He was really taking it personally every single day in training camp. And Justin Jefferson is right there with any of the best training camp players that I've seen. Delvin Cook was really impressive early in his career when he was trying to prove himself. I know running backs can't really run into people, but he was going for contact a lot of the time. And it was always interesting to see veteran players and how they approached it too, ramping up, getting more and more into it as it went along. But Jefferson, I have never seen him not take a practice seriously, not put in a complete effort. Every single day that he goes out, the one-on-ones, the 7-on-7s, the 11-on-11s, he's trying to make every single play. He's trying to embarrass his own teammate cornerbacks and put on a show for the crowd. And he really does try to do that. I think that that matters to him, that the people came out and he knows that they want to see him catch touchdowns. So he catches touchdowns over people and does gritties into the end zone. He hypes up the fans. Like the energy of this man. Remember, there was the one year where he got hurt in training camp. I think it might have been 2021, where he went down and injured his shoulder, maybe an AC joint type of injury during camp. And for the rest of the entire training camp, Jefferson walked around with a football in his hands. Like every single day, he walked around with a football in his hands until he finally was able to get out there. There are few people you will ever run into in your life that love something as much as Justin Jefferson loves playing football. And it's so apparent and it's so entertaining to watch and breathtaking to watch sometimes. It's like seeing LeBron James do a warm up dunk. I went to a randomly Miami Heat versus Dallas Mavericks game a couple years ago. And after watching Luka Doncic warm up, I would not have traded him. Luka Doncic did like trick shots and crazy stuff from all over. And it was crazy to watch. It was so much fun. That's kind of what Justin Jefferson in these camp practices is. But I think last year was a little different for Justin Jefferson in training camp as far as hunkering down and taking it seriously. Not that he didn't ever like take a day off or compete or any of that stuff. Even when he was negotiating his contract, he was going hard all the time in training camp. I didn't feel like he ever took that veteran day or that hold in type of thing in 2023. He was smoking fools in that training camp as well. But where it changed for me last year was him understanding that Kirk Cousins wasn't there anymore. And you could, as a wide receiver, look at training camp as, hey, I'm just going to run the routes I'm supposed to run. I'm going to do my job, and the quarterback's got to do his job, and that's life, right? Just like with Kirk Cousins. Kirk is in charge of the offense. That's the quarterback's job. I'll do what I'm going to do. You're going to do what you're going to do. But I felt like last year, Justin Jefferson put the whole franchise on his shoulders in that training camp in a way that I hadn't really seen from him before. He, I think, took a responsibility for the results with Sam Darnold that before it was do my job, get the football from Kirk, do what Kirk needs me to do. And there wasn't as much of a leadership element to it. It was more of leading by being the best player, leading by not having a hissy fit if you don't get the football for 2 games, leading by just whooping everybody, which is a good way to lead. And there's nothing wrong with that. And if Jefferson had just said last year, hey, look, throw me the football and everything will be fine and whatever, he still would have been really good. But I think that what came along with that big contract for some players, and I asked a few people with the Vikings about this kind of, behind the scenes, just about like, am I seeing this right? That some players can take the big contract and look at it as, all right, well, I've made it and nobody can tell me nothing now because I got the guaranteed money and I'm just going to do whatever I want. And some players are still very good when doing that, but it's a different attitude. Whereas Justin Jefferson has taken the contract and decided, this means more. This means more to me. This franchise's wins and losses. Like, I know that people like to debate over quarterback wins. For Jefferson, it's wide receiver wins. It's his own wins. It's when they win, it's on him. When they lose, it's on him. And how well they perform in a mini camp is on him now. If he didn't show up to OTAs, who would have cared? Like, anybody? I mean, who would have told him, oh man, you're really letting us down? Like, nobody. It's Justin Jefferson. But he made the effort to show up, and he said it was important to him because he felt like he had to show the rest of the team that he's doing every bit as much as them, and that he's the guy that they can look to. He's the one that has to say something now to the other players. Like, when things aren't going well, or when he notices that somebody else needs a pick me up, or whatever it might be, when a message needs to be sent, it's going to be sent by him now. And he called himself shy previously and said, I'm not really that big of a talker, but I've had to make myself that because that's my role now on this team. And that transformation becomes extremely relevant. And this is why I think the 2024 season, it was very entertaining and it did not ultimately result in playoffs. But the ripple effects of that season going forward for JJ McCarthy, it, I mean, I think it's really important what happened in 2024 with those ripple effects of Kevin O'Connell learning how to train a quarterback who had never played in his offense before and had never had success before, and communicating with a different quarterback that wasn't Kirk Cousins, that was still ascending as a player and still learning. Sam Darnold, he hadn't played in the entire 2023 season, was still ascending as a player, and showing everybody that he could do that. And also Justin Jefferson, if Kirk Cousins is still there, he's probably the same Justin Jefferson who's playing his role and doing what Kirk wants him to do and going from there. But what Sam Darnold's presence forced him to do, because Darnold was not a, yo, this is my franchise now type of guy. Like, no, he wasn't like that. He was more of a kind of doing my job, keeping my head down, just being a good, good teammate, showing up prepared kind of guy. But he wasn't the biggest rah rah, everybody follow me, I'm sending the message. Sam Darnold's a pretty quiet guy overall. And I think that Jefferson picked up some of that and said, put it on me instead, and learned through that experience of last year that now he can carry over to JJ McCarthy and helping a new quarterback, somewhat inexperienced, in McCarthy's case, very inexperienced, but with a training camp under his belt, and help him to improve, to learn, and to build chemistry, and also pull the whole entire team along with him. So how those two build their chemistry, JJ McCarthy and Justin Jefferson, I think will be the biggest determining factor of the Minnesota Vikings 2025 season. There's a lot of other stuff that we're interested in, including, do they run the football better? Do they block for McCarthy better? Do they blitz less, play better coverage? Do they blitz the same and set the sack record? I mean, all those things that we could talk about. How's the punting competition? Is the kicker going to hit clutch kicks? All that stuff matters. It takes everybody to win a bunch of games. But if there's one thing that you would rank as the top factor of how many games the Minnesota Vikings win in 2025, it is the chemistry between JJ McCarthy and Justin Jefferson. And I'll throw a couple crazy stats at you. Number one, when any quarterback has thrown the ball in the direction of Justin Jefferson over his career, that quarterback, whether it was Mullins, the time that Josh Dobbs got him killed, Kirk, Darnold, whoever it was, the quarterback rating of that quarterback throwing the ball to Justin Jefferson was 111.1. If you have 111.1 quarterback rating, you will be in the MVP race. So anyone directing the football toward Justin Jefferson plays like an MVP. But JJ McCarthy's got to trust him. He's got to believe in him. He's got to find him. He's got to understand when you can throw it into double coverage to Jefferson and when you can't throw it into Jefferson for double coverage. Because one of the things through the years statistically that does pop up is that quarterback rating would be even higher if Jefferson didn't have so many interceptions while quarterbacks were trying to throw his way. And of course, that's Nick Mullins trying to throw behind him and getting picked off. And, there were times where Kirk or Darnold would put it up for Jefferson and get picked off. But you have to be willing to do that if you're JJ McCarthy. And this 6 weeks or so in training camp, or however many weeks training camp is, 5 or 6 weeks, is going to be the most vital time for McCarthy figuring that out. When can he throw into tight coverage? When can he try to force the ball into a tight window? When can he throw up a 50-50 ball to Justin Jefferson? And when is it a little bit too much? Because as much as Jefferson says, hey, I'll go get it no matter what, that's mostly true, but it's not 100% true. And here's the other stat that I found interesting, that over Jefferson's career, the larger sample, he is slightly over 50% in contested catches, which you'll hear coaches call 50-50 balls. They're not. They're not actually 50-50 when you look at the entire league's performance by the PFF stat contested catches. But Justin Jefferson makes them 50-50, which truly makes him unique. So how does JJ McCarthy not only build chemistry with Jefferson, and there's another element to that too, which I think McCarthy mentioned, and I've heard other people, corners and Kevin O'Connell, bring up as well, that Jefferson is a little unusual. As easy as it is to throw the ball to him open, and it's not a one-man operation. Like, O'Connell's drawing up plays that are set up to get Jefferson open and beat the double coverage and all that sort of stuff. But he is a little bit different of a route runner than any other wide receiver that JJ McCarthy will have ever played with before. So his long strides cause so many problems for defensive backs if you watch it closely. And it can be unfortunate sometimes that the television cameras will zoom so much into a quarterback that you don't see some of the details of a wide receiver. But he has such long strides that it gets corners back on their heels, and also can make it pretty difficult for them to identify where he's going. It can also, for the quarterback, be different as far as leading him, throwing him in front of him, and figuring out when he's coming out of those breaks. And you have to see it in camp. You have to see it over and over and over again. So what we saw last year was Sam Darnold started off kind of slow in training camp. I remember, I think he had a bad first padded practice. And of course, that response was, oh, typical. It's Sam Darnold. It's going to be pretty tough if he has to start because he's bad. And then by the third camp practice, he was figuring it out. But when the padded practices started, he did not have this chemistry with Jefferson. I remember a little bit of frustration on a couple of slant routes that Darnold threw behind him or didn't time out right, had picked off. And as they went throughout that camp, it grew and grew and it improved. And I felt that in Cleveland, they had kind of a tough challenge in the Cleveland defense. The first day of Cleveland practices last year was pretty rough for the offense. And the second day was much better, where Darnold hit a bomb to Jefferson. They had some great red zone reps with Jefferson. And it felt like something clicked there. So it was that late in training camp when Darnold and Jefferson truly clicked. So when will it be for JJ McCarthy, or will we get to the end of training camp and wonder, like, are those two good? Are those two on the same page? I think Justin Jefferson, if we were ranking all the people in training camp and how important they are to this next 6 to 8 weeks, of course, JJ McCarthy is number one. Justin Jefferson, I think, would be number two on that list. I'm very, very interested to see him on a daily basis. So, stars. Do you guys want to talk about some stars? Like, who's got your interest this year in training camp? Because in preseason it's not going to happen. There's not going to be a lot of that. Maybe Jefferson plays a single series or two series to try to get McCarthy more acclimated, but I'd be pretty surprised if Jefferson ever comes off that sideline in preseason. He's just way too important. They can't have what happened a couple of years ago with Irv Smith getting hurt in the preseason. Then he was lost for the year because Mike Zimmer decided he needed to see one more rep from Irv Smith and the starting offense in the fourth preseason game. That was pretty crazy, actually, now that we think about how little Kevin O'Connell uses him. But maybe just to get JJ McCarthy acclimated, maybe we'll see McCarthy play a little bit more than we have seen from Sam Darnold or Kirk Cousins. But I'm guessing it's not going to be a lot. So it will be those camp practices where this entire foundation of him and the offense is formed. And that will include Addison, Naylor, Hawkinson. He's going to have to build those chemistry reps with all of those guys. But I think the second most in need of chemistry is probably TJ Hawkinson, because last year we saw that there was no training camp between Sam Darnold and TJ Hawkinson. And I don't know that they ever actually got onto the same page. And when I talk about who you want to hear about, this is stars night. This is like stars. Let's talk stars. I know you guys want Oscar Chapman and you want the punting competition. What stars are you most interested in training camp? That is the impetus of this show. It's like, hey, we're going to talk about tight end 3 all summer long, I promise. And the battles that are going on in the back end of the roster. And we're going to talk about JJ McCarthy, but I also don't want to forget to talk about the other stars that have our interest. And I'll just give you a couple of more that I'm going to have my eyes on. And I wouldn't count. I mean, I know you guys want to talk about Dallas Turner. I wouldn't count Dallas Turner in this. Like, this is actually my whole point of the show tonight, is that when I say who do we want to talk about with stars, showing up in the comments is Rondale Moore, Oscar Chapman, and Dallas Turner. Stars, the play, not Josh Oliver, the stars of this team, the guys that are going to drive their success. What do you want to talk about them with training camp? Like the next person is going to throw me Chaz Chambliss or whatever, and it's like, that's what I'm saying. Like, that is my whole point of the show. Is what about the stars? Okay, how about this? We'll start with Stephanie. There you go. How about Stephanie hoping the interior are all stars? There we go. There's a good place to begin, because Ryan Kelly is a 4-time Pro Bowler, and Will Fries is one of the highest paid guards in the entire NFL. So those are the stars of the Minnesota Vikings. And let's talk about both of their outlooks. For Ryan Kelly, I think it's going to be a little bit difficult to analyze Ryan Kelly from the sideline because of a lot of the most important parts of Ryan Kelly. And now you guys are getting it. So I appreciate that. Now we're rolling in the comments. So this is good. But with Ryan Kelly, how do we really identify from watching on the sideline at practice every day whether he and JJ McCarthy are getting on the same page? I think it's going to be subtle. It's going to be, hey, like, is he getting blitzed all the time? And is he under pressure all the time? And are they asking Brian Flores to take it back a notch? Or are we talking about looking like they're having the best time that we've ever seen against Brian Flores defense? Because the last 2 years, there was some serious frustration from Kirk Cousins in 2023. I mean, you know how Kirk does that when you know that he's mad, but he doesn't really want to admit that he's mad. He kind of does that, he does that smile thing like, I'm, oh, well, and then he says something sort of passive aggressive. Well, he did that in 2023 about Flores' defense, because I think that he felt like they were having trouble making progress with the offense because Flores was sending so much stuff at them. And Darnold didn't give us any hints, but there were a few days of practice where even, Kevin O'Connell said, oh yeah, Flores is, he's not backing off out there. But, this year in the NFL, the copycat league, I am certain, has noticed the success of what Brian Flores has been doing over the last couple of years with the Minnesota Vikings. And I saw more Flores-like stuff last season against the Vikings than we had seen in 2023, or that I had seen previously at 22 or before that. A lot of the simulated pressures, a lot of 5-man rushes, a lot of this guy's coming from this place and this guy's dropping back, a lot of confusion up front. And it really got to the Vikings at different times during last season. The Arizona game is the one that stands out the most for me, where Jonathan Gannon did a lot of similar kind of things as Brian Flores, not exact same schemes, but same ideas of, oh, you don't see this guy coming on a blitz and he's there. Also, they are running blitzes now where it's not the linebacker's job to get the quarterback. It's the linebacker's job to hit the side of the offensive lineman to create space for somebody else who's coming on a stunt or a twist. So if on a daily basis, it looks like they're picking those up and giving JJ McCarthy time to throw, then I think we'll know that Ryan Kelly is having a serious effect on this offensive line. And we'll start to see a confidence with JJ McCarthy in working with him that, maybe we haven't seen as much in previous quarterbacks under Garrett Bradbury, because this is to me a different level of a center than has been here since really Matt Burke, Jeff Christie, like those kind of level of guys. The first year of Pat Elflein was very, very good, but he wasn't 32 and with 4 Pro Bowls under his belt like Ryan Kelly. So it will be a little more subtle, and we'll have to judge a lot of sort of body language, how they're picking up the pressures, things like that for Kelly. And then when it comes to Fries, there's two things that I'm going to be watching for Will Fries. Number one is, what's his health like? Because he did not participate in OTAs. He did not participate in minicamp. And Kevin O'Connell said that he was on track to be in good shape, but I mean, we just don't know. A compound fracture, I believe, was his injury. That sounds really nasty. That sounds like a very difficult injury to recover from. And the fact that it happened early in the season and he wasn't able to even get on the field for minicamp or OTAs, not the greatest sign in the world. I mean, think about Darisaw tore his ACL later and was actually participating in the individual drills. So his health is where it begins. And there was some rumor, some discussion. I don't want to share something that wasn't confirmed by anybody, but I think there was a report about Seattle wanting to sign Fries and wanting to have him do a what is it when they look you over first? Well, a physical. Yeah, there you go. Wanting to have a physical first before they signed him. And I think that's how, in part, he ended up with Minnesota. There was a report that either insinuated that or said that about Fries and his health. So that's a number one. Is he out there day one? Is he good to go? Is he participating in every practice, or are there some health issues as he recovers from that injury? And then when he is out there, then we're going to be watching for a physical presence that they just have not had at that position. I mean, pushing people around, because in every camp that I have covered, on the interior, it has been getting pushed around by some Vikings defensive lines that were really good and some were less good, but it's never been the offensive line winning that battle. And in 23 against the Titans in those practices, those joint practices, the interior of the offensive line walked off with its tail between its legs. I mean, they got absolutely dominated in those practices. And that was when we sort of knew, like, yeah, I don't know how well this is really going to work. But this year in the joint practices against a very good Patriots defense and a good Patriots defensive line, you want to see something different. And I'll throw Donovan Jackson into this as maybe potential stars, potential stars. He's going to be another one that's a little challenging to evaluate because you have to be patient. You can't just watch 2 padded practices and he gets smoked by Jonathan Allen. You go like, well, I don't know, folks. I'm smelling a bust. Like, that's really hard to evaluate that because guys get better, guys improve. But we'll get a good look at the raw talent. The one-on-ones are always something to watch because you're talking about the biggest, strongest dudes just battling it out in a wrestling match, one-on-one. So how does he perform and handle himself against some really good players in those situations? But for the other two, it will be, I think, a little more noticeable than with Donovan Jackson, where I don't want to overreact to stuff. If there's a bad rep, it might be a learning rep for him. And we can't declare, oh man, well, he got beat twice today, it's over. He's going to be a mess when the season gets here, because he's playing against some really, really awesome players. The Black Ale Bundy says, Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave, to throw it out there, the new guys. Yeah, with Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave, there's two things that I think are big storylines in training camp. And like I said, now we're rolling. Like, now you got the players I'm talking about here. There's two big storylines in training camp. Well, number one, of course, is their health, because they're both coming off injuries. Allen should have had a full offseason. He actually played in the playoffs. We'll see where Hargrave is at, but he got injured early in the season. So my expectation is those guys are good to go, completely practicing in mini camp as well. And there's the part about their usage. Where are they going to line up? What are they in this system? Because this is a 3-4 based system. And I was thinking about how this is kind of reminiscent of some of the old school 3-4 that has not existed in a really long time in the NFL. It's kind of sent me back a little bit to the Pittsburgh Steelers, the New Orleans Saints, teams like that, with how you could envision them playing more of base personnel than we ever see, as the NFL mostly has turned over to nickel and they don't have four linebackers on the field anymore. But this team might. And in those 3-4 systems, they have the 3-4 defensive end, which is kind of a unique position in itself. And Pittsburgh has always been famous for having these guys where you're not playing in a gap, in the A gap, for example, or directly over the guard if you're the defensive tackle, which I'm pretty sure Hargrave and Allen have always played in 4-3 systems where that's what they're doing. They're just lining up directly over the guard. Maybe they go outside, maybe they go inside. I could check their lineup alignments for their careers, but I don't think that they've played a lot over the tackle, which would be kind of B gap and over the tackle, getting very football-y here. But I think you can envision what I mean, where you're going to have the outside linebackers playing in that wide 9 type of position where you're hanging outside of the tackle. And then you've got the defensive ends that are kind of over the tackle or maybe just shaded inside. That adds a whole new barrel of problems for an offensive line. But if it's a little different for these guys, like, how do they adjust? Or are they going to line up in more traditional spots? How they look against the run is a major question for the season that we can't answer in training camp. I mean, there's just no way. There's no way to watch, because the run reps are basically a second and a half of full speed. And then, all right, everybody stop. You want to make sure that you get the run detail down right, who's supposed to be blocked, and then you don't want to get anybody hurt on those run plays. It gets a little physical, but only for about 2 seconds. So we're not going to really be able to tell, like, oh man, Hargrave got manhandled there. Like, I don't know. Maybe seeing some physicality from Will Fries, that it might stand out a little bit, and maybe we get some pushing and shoving. But aside from that, I guess what I'm looking at is just where they're lined up, and are they on the field at the same time a lot? Like, is their base setup to have those guys on each side of Harrison Phillips? Or are they playing in more of 4-3 type of looks where they have 2 defensive tackles and the outside linebackers are just on the edge like traditional defensive ends? And are they rotating rather than playing an actual 3-4? Because here's me, having grown up in the 90s when there was lots of 3-4 defenses, and being like, okay, this will be like Marty Schottenheimer's Kansas City Chiefs with Neil Smith and Derek Thomas or something, right? It might not be. So how does that look? And do both guys look a little bit of their age, or do they look spry? When the pads come on, we're gonna start figuring that out. Alex brings up Harrison Smith and says, I need to know if this Hitman 22 last season so I can properly take it in. I think anywhere from here, Alex, you should just properly take it in. Yeah, because this could very well be the last one. It might not be, but I think even last year, properly taking it in, I was saying to Harrison that, like, I thought it was over after last year. And I just said something to him as we were walking out in Glendale after the Vikings lost to the Rams. And then when he came back, I was like, okay, well, I guess not. I guess that isn't it. But it has been an honor to watch the vast majority of his career as one of the best players in the entire NFL over the last decade plus, and in my opinion, a deserving Hall of Fame career. Whether he gets there or not is a different story from deserving, because I think that he is, from having seen it up close. My concern is that you have to see it up close to really understand. And there's only one Hall of Fame voter in town. We can't bring everybody in and show them 10 years of Harrison Smith playing, but I think you should properly take it in. I also think that there is a legitimate Harrison Smith storyline for this year. Last year in training camp, I mean, he could have skipped camp and just shown up week 1, and he knew exactly what Cam Bynum was going to do. Cam Bynum knew exactly what he was going to do. And those guys worked so well off of each other. Harrison Smith, Cam Bynum, like, they were perfectly in sync. But now we don't really know how that's going to work with Harrison Smith. And is it Theo Jackson? Is it more of Josh Metellus playing the actual safety spot as opposed to playing up at the box all the time? I kind of like the idea more of Theo Jackson just taking Cam Bynum's spot. But since there is more talent that they can put into the front seven, specifically Dallas Turner and working him in, does that means you have to either take somebody like Ivan Pace off of the field or Josh Metellus, who I don't think that they're taking off the field very often. So where are you going to put him? Or you could take Theo Jackson off the field unless it's third down and you're using, 6 or 7 defensive backs, depending on the situation. So who plays next to Harrison Smith? Do they build that same sort of connection that we've seen in the past from Anthony Harris, Andrew Sendejo, and most recently Cam Bynum? If they're able to do that with Theo Jackson, it just adds another layer to this defense. If they're able to be more versatile and move Josh Metellus back to that traditional free safety type of spot, then I mean that gives a different layer too, because then he can come into the box and he can blitz from depth and all sorts of different stuff. So that is Harrison Smith will be watching more than just for a nostalgia factor, but also for like, hey, like, are you going to do it again? Are you going to be able to build something special with somebody else again at that safety position? Kevin McDermott's pinky. That's not right. That's not, you know what? I know that so Maggie Robinson is going to be on in about 20 minutes or so. That's another story. Maggie, write down a note. I know she's watching behind the scenes. Kevin McDermott's pinky, and I'll explain. Just write that down. That's a story. So Andrew, I had a lot of, by the way, loved all of the emails that I got suggesting stories to tell Maggie and things like that. People who enjoyed that last week, if you missed it, that was a fun time of Maggie learning some Minnesota Vikings lore, including Randy Moss mooning and things like that. But Kevin McDermott's pinky says, Andrew Van Ginkel, curious if his role changes at all and if he moves around more. Me too. Me too. Because of the Dallas Turner factor, they want Dallas Turner on the field. It makes the most sense to get the most talent on the field and not just have Dallas Turner be a rotational player when Andrew Van Ginkel or Jonathan Grenard needs a rest. They could do some of that, and they need to do some of that after playing them so many snaps last year. But having all three of them on the field at the same time is for the best. And I looked up, I had thought in my mind, like, man, I've seen Andrew Van Ginkel play a ton as an inside linebacker. I know I have. And this is why we have stats and data, because I went back last year and looked at their numbers of how often he actually lined up on the inside. And it was only 89 times out of, whatever, 800 something snaps for last year, which is, 1 out of every 10 snaps. So it's some, but I'm sure that every time it happened, I noticed. So then in my brain, I thought, oh, he does that all the time. But he only did it 89 times through last year. Could that number go up? Could we see Andrew Van Ginkel essentially bump Ivan Pace off the field sometimes? Or could it be a really wild personnel package where you have Jonathan Grenard, Dallas Turner playing on the edge, Andrew Van Ginkel and Blake Cashman, and then Josh Metellus moves back to the regular safety position, something like that? I think you can mix and match, and that's what they're really going to do. I would expect is they're going to be mixing and matching with different packages and different alignments with Andrew Van Ginkel all the time. Because last year he played on one side a little bit more than the other. If I'm not mistaken, it was left side more than the other, but actually was on the right side more than I had remembered when I looked at that data. So he's always been a guy who can do pretty much anything. And I'm thinking about like opposing teams. Like, remember with Anthony Barr, I think a lot of people, when you say Anthony Barr, they go contract. I know that second contract wasn't the best, but when Anthony Barr was at his best and he was playing inside linebacker, he was kind of a menace. And he's got a similar size to Andrew Van Ginkel, where he could rush up the middle. He was a very successful blitzer. And I remember writing an article about that and kind of kicking off a little bit of that discussion of should he be blitzing more with Mike Zimmer with the double A gap stuff. And then he could drop back and was very good at matching up with running backs in space. And I think for a little while there, Anthony Barr was a pretty serious weapon for the defense. And could Van Ginkel do shades of that occasionally? You don't want to, after a second team all pro season, I mean, you don't want to start saying, oh, Andrew Van Ginkel, hey, go play something else, but shades, touches of this or that. And maybe his sack number goes down from, what was it, 11 last year? Maybe it goes down from 11 to 6.5, but he's actually more valuable or just as valuable as he was last year. I could definitely see that. Let's see. Thank you so much for the super chat. Funny boy Roddy. Appreciate that. Says Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason are a dynamic running back duo in the NFL this upcoming season with our new O line. Yeah, I agree. Aaron Jones, another great name to talk about for training camp. Running backs are a little bit more tricky, though. Let me just finish. I'm sorry. Let me just finish the one point about Van Ginkel and tie it to training camp is that we're going to be looking for that. That was the whole point about that usage is looking for hints. Is it going to be Turner playing more linebacker if they're on the field at the same time? Or does Turner get the edge and Van Ginkel moves back inside? That's what we're gonna be looking for there. But with Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason, can we really get an idea of what that rotation is going to be like in training camp? I don't know that we're going to, because if I'm the Vikings, I'm doing the same thing that they did last year in camp, which was pretty much not use Aaron Jones a lot. He was out there enough to learn, and he was doing all the walkthroughs as RB1 that they do in the morning. So that's kind of how camp works. They do walkthrough in the morning, and then we go out there at the end of walkthrough and they come off the field. We do interviews and they do press conferences, and then they go back for practice. And Aaron Jones was doing all the walkthrough stuff. He was not taking all the practice reps because that would be a bad idea to have a guy of his age and mileage, especially coming off last year, out there doing all the reps. So I think we're going to see a ton of Jordan Mason. And what we might be able to figure out with Jordan Mason, who I will slide into the star category, what I think we're going to be looking at is just like, what kind of schematics are they using there? Does it look like it's more of the outside zone type of stuff that he was so successful with San Francisco? And does he look like the type of running back? And I know there's a good sample size of him averaging 5 yards a carry, but does he look like the type of running back that's going to be a duo where they not only trust him, but think he's an impact player? Or is it more going to be, hey, this is the Aaron Jones show and you're here to help and you're there to be there if Aaron Jones gets hurt? But that's really what it is. And one thing that you can tell in training camp is pass protection. You could definitely tell pass protection in training camp. And Jordan Mason just didn't have to do a lot of it last year. I mean, Kevin O'Connell mentioned thinking that he is capable, and he's certainly big enough, but he didn't have a ton of pass protection reps for the 49ers. And that's something that's going to make a huge difference for how much he can play. And we saw that with Ty Chandler, where Chandler was so poor in pass protection that he became kind of unplayable. And I doubt that's going to be the case for Mason, that it's going to be that poor, but can it be actually a difference maker with his size and strength? So I'll really be looking much more at Mason, and we'll probably see a ton of reps from Mason because Aaron Jones is going to stay on ice over on the sideline a lot of the time.